We're going to get started. Thank you all for joining us. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Michael Helmbrecht. And rather than read this bio I've been given, I'm going to tell you, Michael is a UC Berkeley alumnus. He is a BSAC alumnus. He is a Microlab alumnus, and he's a Nanolab alumnus. And he's going to tell us some of the things he did while he was with us, and some of the things he did after he was with us. Michael.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out today. I wasn't sure how many people would be here in the summer. I know, not a lot of people around. So thank you. I'll apologize in advance for all the mistakes and self-deprecation and all that stuff and the stumbled words. I won't say this is the best practice, seminar I've given. It's been a long time since I've given a seminar, so I'm a little rusty, but thanks for bearing with me. Bill kind of explained it. I'm going to run through, sort of the early years of a company I started and founded out of BSAC as a spinoff of BSAC. Ran it through the micro lab and the nano lab and basically talked through some of the, turns out I focused a lot on the really early days. So people interested in starting a business, and then kind of run through the years rather quickly. I'll have a couple interludes of just sort of cool technology pictures because, not everybody's totally interested in starting a business or hearing about all those trials and tribulations. So bear with me if you get bored for sections. Please ask lots of questions. I don't have that many slides. This is not an hour and a half talk trying to squeeze it into an hour. It's probably at, 45-minute talk, 30-minute talk. So with that, let's get started. Let's see, I founded a company called IrisAO. Me, and not just me, of course, it's a teamwork effort, back in 2002. We spun out of BSAC. It was really based on my Ph.D. research and some other adaptive optics from other folks. We did all our fabrication in the micro lab and then nano lab. We built deformable mirrors, DM for short. If I use the word DM, that's what it stands for, deformable mirror. We built adaptive optic systems, built tons of products, tried all sorts of stuff, lots of exploration. But in the end, as a business, we made the active decision to close it down. So doors closed in 2018. It takes a while to wind down a business. So in the IRS's minds, we were shut down June 2019, a year later. And I learned a few things along the way. Hopefully I'll impart some of these, this is not to say do it as I do. It's probably to say don't do it as I did. But hey, that's life, right? You learn some of the best lessons are actually learned by failures and doing things wrong the first time. So first, what is this all about? What was the crux behind IrisAO? What's the AO mean in IrisAO? And the AO is adaptive optics. The concept is really quite simple. In the upper left, and I'll try to use the mouse here if I can, there it is. You have an aberrated light beam wavefront coming in. And so originally it was from stars. Astronomers were looking at stars, look up at the sky, the stars twinkle at night. Other different applications in optics, there are different things that kind of mess up that beam. Because really what you want that beam to be is instead of this sort of wiggly shape, you want it to be nice and straight. And so that what you end up doing is you reflect it off of a mirror. And if that mirror has the right shape, it will then reflect a nice flat wavefront. And the end result is if you were looking at a spot, point spread function, with aberrations at the lower left, you get this big blurred out spot, fuzzy thing that essentially just sort of lowers intensity and makes resolution terrible. With adaptive optics, you get this nice tiny little point. Now that's an individual point within a field. So if you're imaging something, that's essentially the metric that the resolution that you can get out of your image. So it's going to effectively improve your resolution. I'll show some images along the way. It's kind of a hand wavy argument. What we did in the nano lab was make these mirrors here. And so this mirror, this MEMS mirror is this, the cartoon sketch in the middle. It was an array of mirror segments that we could move around and adjust and shift to create a nice smooth shape. I like to call them my little funhouse mirrors. And so instead of going to the funhouse and you stand up in the mirror, it makes your head fat, your body skinny, tweaks you. These do this the opposite. They would fix that. So that's the concept. This stemmed all the way back to grad school. This is I would call my moneymaker image. I made that, I think, well, a version of that, back. It's in my dissertation back in grad school. That single image has lived on for 2 decades and now today again. So I started this, in 1999, I think, 2000 for grad school for this program. And here we are today. So what it is a mirror segment shown in an exploded view. We have a top portion, a rigid mirror segment. Back sort of in the vintage of manufacturing of MEMS, we were heavily in the world of surface micromachine polysilicon actuators and things. Those were great for doing all sorts of fun stuff, making motions, actuation motions, moving things around, using parallel plates, but were terrible mirrors. And so that's where this hybrid approach came in, where we assembled a nice, thick, rigid, single crystal silicon brick, flat, optically shaped, smooth brick on top of this actuator down here. The actuator itself had an upper layer of polysilicon and then a lower layer with electrodes, 3 electrodes underneath there. It's supported by 3 beams. The way you do that, if you energize all 3 electrodes, you get a vertical or a piston motion. If you do a differential voltage across those, you can get tip and tilt. And so with those 3 degrees of freedom, you can somewhat arbitrarily position that mirror segment. You tile them together in an array, you can make nice smooth shapes. The magic, or what we thought was the cool idea that came out of grad school, was essentially engineering residual stresses in this little gray layer here to pop the structure up after microstructure release. So after a really long HF etch, instead of having a gap of say a micron or 2, because that's about how thick we could do PSG and LTOs at the time, we were able to pop that segment up. And we had demonstrations of anywhere from 20 microns, we even had up to 60, 70 microns of elevation of popping that up. And it popped up actually fairly uniform after many years of development and optimization and all that. Questions? Go for it.
What material did you use for the bond sites?
Gold.
Huh. Was it able to survive the HFH or the adhesion material to survive?
Yeah, and that took a lot of work and a lot of time. But yeah, so it was we ended up using just a tight tungsten adhesion layer and then a thin gold layer and electroplated on top of that, and that handles HF at release quite well. There are tricks though about how not to get the polysilicon to etch away in the presence of gold and HF, and that was that was probably the bulk of that. And it turned out, and this was in here, I'll say probably 30 times, go reach out to friends, get as much advice as you can. My old sort of grad school roommate at the time, Tim Brosnahan, I was chatting with him about this and the woes we're having, and he said, "Oh, you should try this self-assembled monolayer." Can't remember exactly which one that was, but we used that and it was magic. We went from chewing up, eroding our polysilicon to essentially having not defect-free, not perfect, but really good results. Yeah.
It's a little hard to tell, but are the electrodes planar? Are they all in the same plane?
So the electrodes are all in the same plane, yeah.
Okay. But you've shown one out of plane?
Sorry. So these 3 blue electrodes are all in plane. They're all a single polysilicon layer that's then etched. The red layer is there was a sacrificial layer between. There's an anchor down at the edges. The red layer is another layer of polysilicon that we use. So in the nomenclature of surface micromachining, we were essentially a 3 poly process. Not shown here is the underlying wiring layer, and then the electrode layer, and then the polysilicon layer. So again, people of that era, I think at the time there was the MEMS process from MCNC. Another one, Sandia National Labs developed what they called the Summit technology. First it was a Summit 4, then a Summit 5. I'll get into it. Our first product was actually made with the Summit 4 technology that we dumbed down to Summit 3. We actually didn't use that 4 layers. So this is the crux of what IRIS-A was about, and that's where we did all our development.
What's the degrees of movement?
So our most common mirror was what we call the 5 micron stroke mirror. So the maximum vertical deflection was 5 microns. Tip and tilt was about half a degree plus minus optical, so half of that. But it's not as if you can get that 5 microns of piston motion and the tilt, because you get into instabilities. And so it was like the actual operating space was almost like a weird football shaped thing. So right in the middle, when I've sort of biased it halfway, I can get lots of tip and tilt. But if I try to go up or pull it down, I can no longer get that tip and tilt and keep it from crashing in. So it has this inherent instability as a, as a parallel plate actuator. So there's, lots of downsides to this technique, but it was super easy to manufacture at the time. And ultimately, it's what limited the amount of dynamic range we could get. When we started in grad school, oh, I could get this thing to do, I could, a third of the gap, we can do that. If we take it to 30% of the gap, look how much stroke we have. But eventually we ended up using, maybe half of the theoretical limit at best, just because you need this thing to be a robust product at some point. So a lot of assumptions are in the early days as we worked through them and really tried things out and made things practical. We learned, that you can't quite get the performance you really you thought you might once have, thought you had. All right, so that's the mirror, but there's a heck of a lot more to an adaptive optic system. So an adaptive optic system is essentially taking this mirror and putting a control loop around it. So it can actually adjust dynamically to the wavefront that's coming in. And that's now we start adding a lot more complexity. So you've got an optical system to direct the optical beam in. You've got that little mirror we talked about. You have a beam splitter where you can go off and you can sample things, either off to an imaging camera. That's one technique of adaptive optics. You can just look at the image, twiddle the mirror, see if it got better or worse, and then keep twiddling it until the image gets better. People called that sensorless AO at the time. It's kind of a dumb name, but the point is it's sort of image planar, based corrections. The other method is to sample it using a wavefront sensor, and that's where you're literally sampling subsets of this wavefront with little lenslets and detecting the local slopes discretized over the array. Then you reconstruct that into the shape that that you think that you're measuring. Which is called the wavefront reconstructor. That then sends the appropriate signal to the actuator control, which is a lot of computation and high voltage drive electronics to then send voltages off to this big array of mirrors. So you can see that, complexity is already starting to build up. From a simple concept of make the mirror to, oh, let's make this full adaptive optics system. So that's the backdrop. That was sort of the technology, the idea behind it. Now I'm going to sort of segue into, hey, how did we start IRIS-AO? Okay. So essentially around the time, these are early images down here in the lower left of Ph.D. research. So hey, I made this big 7-segment array of actuators, worked with some students at BSAC to come up with this assembly technique, a fluidic microassembly technique to put mirror segments on top. Really fun, neat, cool stuff. And, young and I won't say dumb, I'll say enthusiastic. Thought, hey, we can make a business out of this. I always wanted to start a business. Let's do this. Let's go. So, not knowing anything, but hey, we know we need money to do development. So I teamed up with, and I saw a lot of other sort of grad school friends at the time, startup companies by writing an SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research Grant through the government at the time. Those come from NASA, they come from the Air Force, Navy, essentially they're technology grants to people developing cool technologies. So fellow BSAC students, Utara Srinivasan, Pamela Caton, and myself, we submitted our first Air Force Phase 1 grant. Thought, this is great, this is wonderful, we're gonna do this. We got the response, and I'm paraphrasing here, of course, but they said, technically, it sounds like a great idea, we love it, but you really don't have a clue about business. To be in SBIR stands for business. Get a clue. To which I'm thinking, wow, that was rude. But it's true. Now what do we do, right? I had no clue. I wanted to start a business, but the idea of what it really means to run a business, run development, all that, I had no idea. So, well, first you don't succeed, try and try again. Thought, I should probably connect with somebody at the business school. That would be a good idea. There is a really good infrastructure here at Cal. We got a business school, top notch in the country, just, a building over, a couple buildings over. Use that. And at the time, there's the innovation here. So there was actually a mixer run by the engineering school and the business school to try to get business folks and technical folks together. And that's where I went out. I went to that, thought, hey, that'd be neat. Maybe I'll meet somebody. Sure enough, I met Matt Campbell. You like technology? I like technology. We both wanted to start a business. So there we go. That's what we started with. He then took, in the fall of 2001, he took a business plan writing class. He got 3 other people to help him put together a business plan around this whole thing. You know, I contributed with technical understanding and you know, what I thought we would need for development, all that. Wildly wrong at the time, but you know, it's all good. Then in spring 2000, so we, at the end of this class, you know, we had ourselves our first business plan. And then in spring of 2002, semester wise, I'm now in semester calendars, Matt and I worked on refining that business plan. We called ourselves Adaptive Systems. We planned to enter the business plan competition. I also started writing my dissertation at the time. A lot of stuff going on. We brought in 2 new founders, one of which was Cliff Nolenberg, also a BSACer. I give shout outs to BSACers at the time. I probably have forgotten a lot of people, so sorry to them if they're listening in. But we brought in Cliff Nolenberg, a BSACer at the time, and Nathan Doble. He was at the University of Rochester doing a postdoc in adaptive optics retinal imaging. So that's where the adaptive optics part came in. We were just, Cliff and I, we were just, you know, hardcore MEMS guys. April 2002, we won the competition. We got 50 grand. What a deal. We thought this is great. A week later, we went out to New York and we competed in the NBA Jungle Business Plan competition. We won that too. My God, we were rock stars. We had this. Yeah, this is good. So that's, you know, those were the first early impressions. We had $75,000 in our pockets of business plan earnings promised to us, in quotes, because it took a while to get one of those payments. But we had our starting capital. We had something to run with. Now I'm going to give you a little life lesson rules. Those are little blue boxes. So I think I kind of skipped over the first one, which was, you know, essentially learn from your failures and move on. Right? Those are big, good lessons. The other one is, hey, get help and input from anywhere and everywhere. There's no way Matt and I could have done this alone at the time. And then with Cliff and Nathan, we leaned on so many other things, so many other people, so many other resources, free resources everywhere. In this case, it was the business plan writing class. So we basically, you know, people were forced into writing a report. They had a project due, so we got to leverage that. You know, sort of an adjunct to that is when you do have these people that run through ideas, explore a lot of them. And do it as a team sport. This is not an individual thing. You really need to talk and throw ideas out there, dumb ideas. This is kind of the whole brainstorming process and really sort of think things through. Figure out what you're going to do and take some of those threads, you know, as far as you possibly can. Even though it's in the abstract, you don't necessarily have a real clue. The thought process of going through that is a big lesson. And finally, once you've figured out what you think is the path, execute. Even if you're wrong, the act of implementing those plans, you'll learn along the way. You'll figure out right away if something went wrong, if there's, you know, bad assumptions, and then correct for those. So we launched $75,000 in hand. I forgot to mention that we also got a little bit of in-kind help from Fenwick and West, lawyers at the time. So they helped start us. They actually did our incorporation papers. That was part of our winnings, proceeds from winning the Berkeley Business Plan competition. So that's, you know, that's where we went to next. And, you know, that was it. Rockstars, what do we do? So we brought in those lawyers, we incorporated, we found space. You know, we needed space to get the technology started. You know, early incorporation work, there's a lot to do. You gotta, you know, awkward moments. You gotta agree on founder shares, who gets what, because it's usually not with 4 people. You know, first thought is, oh, we just get 25%. That's great. We're all friends. But then you start thinking very quickly, people realize like, well, you know, most of this effort is mine, and these ideas are mine. And then it really sort of devolves into who gets what. And so you got to go through those, you know, founder shares. I see a few smiles of people who've gone through this, but you got to go through those and just work it out. Yeah, then, you know, you got to sign on to founder agreements. And if you look at founder agreements run from, you know, we thought we were going to be a big VC-backed company. So we had the big lawyers, Fenwick and West. If you look at the founders agreements, they're pages and pages long of deep legalese that you're not prepared to read as an engineer, especially as an engineer and a business student. And so as an engineer, I kind of like, you read every sentence carefully and think, oh, you come up with all these scenarios and you can just drive yourself nuts of all the things like, well, if I did this, if I, you know, I would get kicked out and lose all my shares. And so it's time to take a breath. And, I'm going to jump straight to rule number 5 is get even more help, preferably from an experienced adult in the room, because they can help you through these things that just, you don't know what's going on. And when it comes to a legal document, my assumption is assume you're going to lose on this one. So I'm trying to say this nicely. So get some help. Bring in those folks. Okay, so you've got your founders agreements, you got to incorporate, you need a name. We went under Adaptic Systems at the time. Well, our lawyers quickly told us, well, Adaptic is too close to Adaptech. Adaptech closed up shop before we did, but they did storage space at the time. They were very keen on their brand. So they said, you don't even bother going there. You will spend all your time in court trying to get your name. Find something else. And so then you do the usual, okay, we need a name. Birds of prey, falcon, whatever, those are all taken, forget it. Then we thought, well, hey, iris is interesting. It's a nice flower, blue and gold. Hey, go Cal, go Bears. It's an optical component. I got it in the eye, advertised in retinal imaging. Hey, this could be it. And then like, well, let's think some more. Then we thought, oh, Cyrus. That's got some symmetry into it. We can make really cool, logos. It's all about the logo, right? Well, fortunately, the internet did exist back then. And this is 2002. So we looked up, hey, what's Cyrus? And we quickly found that there's a thing called Coffin-Cyrus syndrome, which is a rare genetic disorder that's evident at birth. So great. We don't want a company name that's based on, associated with a disease like that, a disorder. So let's back to iris, but hey, let's add AO, in this case, adaptive optics, just to give us a little bit of difference over the other million irises in the world. All right. So with all that, finally got that paperwork done. Got to incorporate with the lawyers. Thanks to them for doing all the legwork on that, because it can be done. You can certainly do it. You don't have to go to lawyers. There's lots of Nolo Press. There are a lot of places out there that can help you start a business. We wanted to be a venture-backed business, so there's a lot more complexity in a C corp. That does take lawyers to set everything up. But if you want to do just an LLP or sort of smaller corporations, start the smaller businesses, partnerships, you can do that on your own if you really want to. So, hey, now we need a place to work. Well, part of the business plan competition winnings or sort of prestige or honors was we got to use the Berkeley Business Incubator at the time. That was located in the basement of the Bancroft Hotel, right next to Cafe Strada. Drank a lot of Cafe Strada in my years. I still love going back there. So we started there for we got the space for a year, and ended up spending a lot of time there. Proximity to the microlab, the nanolab, was key for us. That was fundamental to the technology, to the business. So we had to be as close as we could. We ended up staying there. Space was weird. Not really a business space. We did expand into the back and kind of made it nice. We put in our own little softball clean room and all that. But in the end, it was a weird space. But key to what we needed at the time, it was close to the nanolab. That's where the technology was focused. That was the hardest technology that we had to actively be engaged in. So that was what mattered. So again, if you remember one thing, rule number 5, get help from an experienced adult in the room. All right, so early funding. Now we got started. We had 75 grand. That doesn't really take you very far. So we needed money. What can we do? We've got, we won all these competitions. We have this great idea. Obviously, if we won a business plan competition, we must be, we must have something here. I'll tell you a corollary rule I didn't write here, but we'll get to that. So we started chasing money. VCs, that's where the money's at. That's kind of especially in the Silicon Valley, where else can you get money from VCs? We did our Sandhill Victory Tour with our updated business plan. And I say that because, again, we won all these competitions that we actually had a lot of press. People were interested. We called up VCs. We of course dropped the business plan winnings and all that. And we got meetings with all the partners, which was pretty rare. We thought that was great. But really, the timing of this, and I think you'll appreciate this, because I do remember a talk you gave shortly before this, is the NASDAQ crashed. Dot-com boom, that bubble had burst. There was a lot of VCs just sitting around twiddling their thumbs with a lot of money, sitting on a lot of money, but not knowing what to do with it, knowing where to put it, and they weren't going to put anything with it because there was just too much turmoil in the markets at the time. So hey, that funding source was out in those early funding attempts. We did have some existing funding agencies. My PhD was funded through the Center for Adaptive Optics. They really wanted this adaptive optics stuff to happen. So they funded my postdoc. I got paid for a year, which was great. And they also gave us some money to Iris's startup costs. Now keep in mind, this is a university research, this is an NSF funded research. Their idea of timing is a little different than a small business. So they said, sure, we'll fund you. This was, in June. Proposals rolled around in September. We found out about it in October, November. We didn't actually get our first check until the following February or March. So it takes a lot to, there's a lot of struggles there. We also started working with customers, potential customers. We did some electronic sales to a professor who we got lucky. He was working in adaptive optics. He got a big tranche of funding for going to the University of Galway in Ireland. And so he was able to support us he had to buy something. So he bought some drive electronics from us at the time for 20 grand. And he eventually, he did buy a mirror at the time, but that took us a few years to deliver, which we'll get into. And then we started working on a development proposal with Bausch & Lomb. So we had some, this was pretty exciting. We had some big names. Having Bausch & Lomb as a development contract was really kind of a big thing for us at the time, especially in this retinal imaging and LASIK ophthalmic world. That's where we thought our money was going to be. So that was big, sort of a big exciting thing right in the beginning there. All right, now for the rules. Hey, it's starting that company. It's really hard. It's a ton of work. It is amazingly stressful because you're clueless. And there's so many things that you just don't know and worry about and keep up at night. I remember trying to read through venture books and small business books, with all my free time between writing dissertations and doing the research and trying to get the company together. It's a lot, but it's also really exciting. I hope that at the end of this, I haven't turned people off from entrepreneurship because it is really a good thing. It's also important for Rule 7 here. Really, you got to understand the market you're going into. It's crucial. And a lot of this I didn't learn until 10 years later, and maybe even 15. What sells? How does it sell? Who sells it? Why does it sell? What doesn't sell? How are your products used? Because one of the things about great companies, the ones that were really successful, is they actually came up with a product that people didn't even realize they needed to have. Who knew that search on the internet would be a big thing? And who knew that ads would be, would drive just crazy amounts of money? So there are lots of cases of companies that came out with things with sort of new products that that people didn't realize they needed, and suddenly they did. There's probably 10 other companies for each one of those good ones that flopped, but that's business, that's life. Well, number 8, I saw some. If you look through some prior BSAC seminars, there was one gentleman, I can't remember, he popped up a Y Combinator website page with all sorts of advice for entrepreneurs. And I looked through that afterwards. I'm like, I wish I would have seen that 15 years ago. And then I started thinking about all my lessons. Like, yeah, there's actually a pretty good correlation. These are real. This wasn't just some abstract person writing ideas out. There's actually some thought behind this. And in here, and really I'm tying this to the Bausch & Lomb is, rule number 8 is really don't try to overcomplicate development contracts with big corporations. You will be mired down in endless battles with lawyers, consuming lots of money, and worst yet, consuming time while you're waiting for those little funds to trickle in to actually start development. All right, so here's this is where we started. Here's a little picture of NASDAQ, and I think I was inspired by your presentation. And I keep pointing over here, that we started, this was the dot-com boom right here, where you can see this big old downswing in the NASDAQ. Companies were closing left and right. So, hey, let's start a company because now's a good time. It is actually in some sense a good time because there are fire sales everywhere. I think I'll show some founders pictures later on. They were actually taken in the old Onyx facilities, looking at equipment to buy for the fire sale. Problem is we didn't have any money and most people don't have money. So it's kind of this catch-22. But if you have money, if you have funds, and if you can do it and you have a good idea and you have it, starting a company at the depths of a crash is actually, I think, a really good thing because you have resources abound. People are available, and you can buy lots of equipment if you need it at bargain wholesale prices. Get into it, but you can see over the years, the NASDAQ did its thing. Truthfully, tracking IRIS-AO to the NASDAQ probably isn't a big thing. We ultimately, cut to the chase, we never became a VC-backed company. Just wasn't in the cards for us. So I'll get into that why. But there are some macroeconomics you can pull out of that. There were times where, hey, we almost closed. A few times we almost closed. Shortly after downswings. One of the trends that happens, so we getting ahead of myself, but a lot of our money did come from government grants. When there's no money in industry and products and people aren't sure where to go, the existing companies tend to say, hey, these government grants look great. And suddenly us little IRIS-AO, 4 people fresh out of grad school were competing with big, massive corporations on SBIRs that had just tons of resources and tons of, had armies of people. And so we were competing at many times right during these downswings against big corporations to try to get these government grants and just failed miserably. So I'll show you kind of like our reality of IRIS-AO. We had sort of a couple of dips along the way that generally corresponded to some of these macroeconomic dips in the NASDAQ. Not totally, but close enough. All right, so hopefully you're not getting bored about the story. I will get onto some technology pictures shortly, so bear with me because I think that excites a lot of people. All right, so we did that, we incorporated, we got the first starts. Now, hey, what happened between that? We have a name, we have IRIS-AO to what I'll call our second birthday, our second year of existence. As I alluded to, we had no VC backing, but we were starting to get traction. So full steam ahead, folks. A year later, we won another business plan competition because, hey, turns out we could write a good business plan. It wasn't always related to reality. And I think that's one of the things I mentioned I want to talk about is that just because you can win a business plan competition, it's not real. All the business plan competition says is, do you know how to write a business plan? The caveat is it really based on real numbers? Is it based on a real market? You can do a lot of things to gussy up a business plan to make you look successful. Every business plan in the world has a hockey stick in revenues. Everyone. I would be willing to bet that maybe 1 out of 100. I don't know. Maybe you've had some more experience with it. Anybody else here has? It really doesn't happen that much. But that's I should have done it. If I would have pulled up, it'd be really interesting to see revenues of our business plan relative to revenues of IRIS-AO. I'll show a plot later of some of our revenues, and I can kind of based on memory where we thought we would be versus reality. Okay, I digress. So we won another business plan competition. We went, we did our victory tour down Sandal Lane. They weren't funding. We worked some more on our business plan. We kept doing that. But really, ultimately, what it came down to is we couldn't find an addressable market. That's the market that we could sell to that was exciting enough for VCs, right? Back in the day, the things where it had to be $1 billion market, or you had to show 100 million in revenues. The worst thing is to show 20 million revenues. That's the kiss of death because they don't know whether to keep you or to kill you. And we couldn't even barely drum that up. We had, again, our business plan in the business plan competition showed us with 100 million revenue after 5 years, but that was not real. When we started to bring reality into the mix, it became very apparent that this is not a match. This is just never going to work with a VC. Don't go for that kind of funding if the market doesn't support it, because one, it's going to be hard to get that money. And if you do get that money, it's just going to lead to failure. Angel investors. Angel investors are high wealth individuals, generally speaking, that are essentially VCs, but with a couple year longer time frame. There are zealots that love technology, but angel investing was sort of along those same lines. We couldn't find, again, enough, even though we had an extra 2 or a few years to come up with that market, it was just never big enough. We worked on development contracts. We finally got our Bausch and Lomb contract. That took about a year to negotiate. Maybe it was 9 months. And we learned a lot along the way, and I tell you, we probably should have renegotiated even in the 9 months. We worked on with funding agencies. So the Center for Adaptive Optics, they continued support for us. That was wonderful. We applied to more SBIRs. SBIRs are great. They're like, I'm liking them to a lot of things, but they're kind of a drug, I'll say, because you get a little bit, you do a lot of work and you get a little bit of reward. We applied to 9 different phase 1 SBIR grants. And we got 1 out of 9, but we plugged for each one of those proposals. It took us about a man-month of effort, and the award for winning an SBIR is about 9 months worth of money, of cash. So if you look at it, we basically got out of it what it took us to get 1 award, but then we also had to deliver on the work. So those numbers didn't work out. We spent a lot of time on other larger government grants because, again, VCs were out. We weren't going to sell product. We didn't have any development contracts. There's only so many we could take. So we really worked on some other larger programs that kind of be able to bring real money into the company. Grant programs that were millions of dollars, not $100K over 9 months. Along the way, we lost Matt, our business guy, and we lost Cliff, our processing guy. But then we also added a few more other BSACers. Matthew Hart was a postdoc here at the time, and Thor Janot, he joined as well. So Thor Janot started his own SBIR company before that got acquired by Analog Devices. Matthew Hart, I believe, he worked at Onyx Microsystems for a while. When Onyx shut down, we kind of pulled him over and got to grab a lot of his knowledge. And then on the technology front, we really had some early quick wins for our electronics, and we had some great pictures of MEMS, but really nothing worked. Great demonstrators though, which was enough to get us more government grant funding. Told our story, really gave us a sense of like, there is something here. So with all that, it was time to retrench and really kind of focus on the technology, on the market, trying to get a product in play. All right, now for the rules, the lessons learned. And then it's really good, rule number 9 here, to stop, do a reality check every so often and make sure the vision that you had when you started the company, that coincides with the market. And if not, then address yourself, well, do I change my vision or do I quit? There's no shame in quitting at that point. If they don't match, there's really no shame. It's just a lot of wisdom gained if you went that far. I didn't listen to that advice. I pushed on. I learned a lot more. I generally say I'm happy with the decision I made. Most of the decisions I made along the way. We could ask my wife; she might have a different opinion. A few certain points in life, but we're still together, so hey, that worked out. Rule number 10 is related to that: is try not to be overly invested in the business and the technology. There's lots of other ideas out there. The risk of doing a company right out of grad school based on your PhD research is, guess what? It's in your heart. And there is not a lot of rational thought happening when you've got that much invested in. So beware. Listen to those things. Talk to, again, I'm going to say this a lot of times, talk to a lot of people. Go out there and try to, tell them your story and let them hear it. Because a lot of times when you say it out loud, you really realize like, whoa, this is just not a good thing. There's not a market here. Or you might hear it and say, there's not a market as I currently expected it, but hey, we can do this instead. So again, I'm not be too negative about it. I tend to do that. I'm very self-deprecating in my nature. But the point is really, you need to talk to a lot of people. This is not done in a vacuum. It's done with a lot of help. All right, I promised some technology pictures because there's just enough talk. This was the state of the company about 1.5 years after starting it. So we had a cool picture that we showed everywhere in the upper left-hand corner. That's just an Omarski image of an actuator array built in the microlab. Picture taken on the right here, it's a little Omarski on the time. Great picture, we used it everywhere. 1 or 2 good pictures gets you a long way. We built So with what we did is we basically, you know, I remember we have this polysilicon actuator technology. We had these mirror technologies. We bring them together, we bond them, chip level bonding at first, eventually it was wafer level bonding. So a lot of wafers had to be made. Here's an image of, you know, some of the first arrays, actually assembled and bonded arrays in the microlab. 37 segments there. That was our first 37 segment device. Assembled, you know, at the chip scale, using the microfluidic assembly techniques with a little bit of the system. These weren't like individual mirrors. We did a chip and plopped it down and glued that sucker on, if I remember right. Maybe we soldered that one. No, the memory kind of fails now. We also had larger arrays. We needed to scale adaptive optics. You know, we were looking at retinal imaging. We were looking at astronomy. We were looking at all these different government grants, and people had wild ideas of what you needed for adaptive optics. So we need hundreds and thousands of actuators. So we had to scale up quickly and come up with some demonstrators. So as part of graduate school, I showed the concept of, hey, we can't, it's not just one or two segments to assemble. We can do flip chip bonding and come up with techniques and bond large arrays. And so that's the first sort of, you know, 300-ish segments bonded. In this case, it was just onto a substrate, silicon substrate. It was a short loop, if you will. But it got the point across. We could do this. We can assemble arrays. We got our first, you know, chip. This is the first little multi-chip kind of single die had about 8 different designs on there. That was done on the GCA steppers, GCAUS 2. That was my favorite. No longer in existence. Did a lot of work on there, but that was done on the GCAUS. And yeah, I think we did it solely stepper work at that time. But we got our, you know, we got more pictures, we got a demonstrator, we got actuators. We ran the process through. We also had electronics shown in the upper right. We had interface boards, as god-awful ugly as they were and massive and huge, but we had a way. We could take our electronics, run it with a computer. We could run those wires into an interface board. We can, you know, pop our chip on there, have it wire bonded, and actually move things and twiddle things. And so having that end-to-end demonstration was fundamental. And it's really important. So that's my number 11 rule is to get moving on that. And thank you, Bill. I see the clock is ticking. I said this was a half an hour talk. Apparently I've underestimated how much I can talk. So that was a year and a half. Lots of demonstrators. That's you're going to need. So here's the AEye timeline. As we over the years, again, 2002 to 2018. I'm not going to count the 18 to 19 as we pull things down. You'll see on the left revenues. That's the black line. You'll see on the right the head count. That's the blue dots. If you look deeply, there was not a heck of a lot of revenues, and there were times there were some big dips. And so as founders, you tend to not pay yourselves. That's often what happens, especially in the early years. And then sort of in these big dips, you find ways to leverage whatever you can to keep the company going. I mentioned along the way, we lost our founders. So at the start, it was just Matt and I. Then there was 4 of us. And then along the way, a few years later, we lost a couple founders. And then, boy, 2008, I was the last man standing. We lost Nathan. So along the way, you're going to probably lose some friends, possibly make some enemies. It's not forever. I can go back to each one of these gentlemen and I'm pretty sure, you know, shake their hand and talk to them and have a beer. And, you know, those were sort of long historically way past due sort of issues that we had. What else can you garner out of here? Yes, some big dips. They don't really correlate totally with the NASDAQ, but you know, a couple of these dips are they did correspond to what I talked about of market tanks. People, you know, other companies go to the government grants, and that directly impacted us because suddenly we had a lot more competition. So we had some dips along the way and points that we said, maybe we're going to quit. Oh, maybe we're going to quit, but no. In the early years, again, we had largely government grants on the left. Towards the right, we started actually building product that was nice and selling real stuff and then having issues like service. But the big things, we also got some big custom mirror development contracts. So revenue started rising. We had growth. It was fantastic. You can see the number of people stepped up tremendously from 4. Basically, we averaged 4 people for, you know, half of the lifespan of the company. And then we had this big growth path. Until, right around 2018, revenues dropped significantly. And so then you might say, well, why did it end? It was so good. We had big revenue drops before. Look at 2011. We lost half our revenue there. We didn't quit. Why did we do that in 2018? It wasn't that big of a deal. And that's when the realities, those lessons started coming into play of, okay, look at the market, look at the money, look where things are coming in. We just kind of sort of read the tea leaves, if you will. Government grants were coming to an end. Weird things happen. SBIRs, you can only do so long before they shut you down because you can't have, infinite funding from a small business grant to be innovative. Are you innovative after 16 years to doing the same thing? Some can question that. We had other stuff, our internal advocate at NASA, that was where we got a lot of government funding from. He sadly passed away because of a complication of a transplant surgery. We had a big consulting contract. That was great. We had a wonderful internal advocate. If you can ever find, that's what you need. You need that internal advocate at whatever your customer is, be it a government agency, be it a company. He retired. And with him, so retired the sort of the enthusiasm of doing this program. So that came to an end. And then finally, sales to researchers. We sold mirrors on Edmund Optics. We sold mirrors internationally to biologists, to folks on campus here, to retinal imaging folks, to again, astronomers worldwide. Had lots of cool stuff. But essentially, those weren't covering our costs, and they weren't really covering the development still needed on those larger arrays. So that was it. We sort of saw the point that, I guess the last one is when I was looking at all that, and when we started off Iris, the whole idea was that we were going to have an industrial or a commercial product. That this mirror was going to go into a retinal imaging system or something where we sell, we weren't looking for millions of units a year. We were looking for 1,000 a year, 2,000 a year. And that was just never coming to fruition. We had lots of opportunities, worked with a lot of companies along the way. None of them ever took hold. And so that was really ultimately when I had to sit down and say, what am I doing here? That was the biggest indicator, is there's really no commercial market for this. So that's when it's time to go. And that's what I'm saying. Rule number 12 is set those firm thresholds, try to make them firm, and try your best to stick with them. Like I said, I didn't necessarily stick with a lot of those, signs or see those signs earlier in the years of Iris, but at this point I had enough, I learned enough, I made product, we were good. One of the big things is coming out of grad school, undergrad, master's, PhD, is you get a lot of skills. There's a lot to learn. I mean, I learned tons at BSAC. The business school teaches a lot of great stuff. You have really deep technical expertise in what you're doing. You get to build, solid engineering background. You build prototypes. A lot of the fundamental tools you have in your toolkit, so to speak, coming out of grad school. But the reality to run a business, and you can just see by the font size from left and right, here's a big gap, huge gap. And that's a partial list. And these are real things, right? These are not things I just sort of looked up on the internet, but these are real things. But the message here is just understand, none of this is insurmountable. You can learn all that. Everybody here has the chops, has the smarts to learn all that stuff. It's not rocket science per se, as it is that with a technical background, you can work through all these issues. But really, it's a lot of work to reinvent the wheel every time. So back to one of the rules 2 and 6 or whatever it was, is get lots of help, get advice from people reach out, because there's a big gap to cover in knowledge. All right. Another technological tour de force. We did a lot of fab in the micro lab. We had lots of different products because we were trying everything. We were trying to put adaptive optics in anything and everything that we possibly could. So in the upper left, we had that first demonstrator chip. That was 2003, end of 2003 when we had that. We worked on sol gel PZT membranes. So hey, we did PZT actuators way back when. Didn't go very far. The technology really wasn't that good. But that was another avenue we tried. We cut that one short because we realized it was too long from actually getting a prototype of something wiggled to a real product. technology wasn't there. Nowadays, PZT is actually becoming a big thing in MEMS, you know, right? It's commercialized to more than just a few handful of things beyond chirp and TDK. And the center column, these were our bread and butter products. That top one is 111 actuator DM, again, made in the nano lab, in the micro lab, that way and that way. That one, we actually worked with wafers from Fairchild Semiconductor. They did our actuator wafers. We did some post-processing on those in the micro lab on the ASML, the old ASML, not the one that's there now. And then built the mirror wafers, did that bonding and all that. We then, Fairchild Semiconductor shut down as a foundry, as a MEMS foundry. They closed that line. It wasn't profitable. And OMM didn't fill their fab. But thanks to OMM for buying the furnaces there at the time. I think that was the story. I don't recall it fully. So we ended up having to then convert to completely micro lab, nano lab development work. In the center here, we built 163 segment or 489 actuator arrays. We built physically larger devices because optics don't like really tiny things. So it was basically a double size actuator. Mirror size from up here to down there. We tried all sorts of stuff. Coatings, that was our big thing. We could do all sorts of coatings that our competitors couldn't do. We did gold and silver and aluminum, and then we also did dielectric coatings on top of that. And then we made big things. 900 actuators. We also had a custom design in 2018 that's this weird sort of shape down here. You can do some geometry and figure out why you would do that. But, you know, that was also 800 solid actuators. We ran tons of wafers. We did our, you know, if I count up the lots, I think we probably did maybe 30 lots of wafers over the course of the 16 years. Now, that's not a lot in terms of if you took this to a fab, but keep in mind that for half the lifespan of the company, we only had 4 people. There was only ever 1 or 2 people that in the fab at a time that did the work. It was only at the end where we really started ramping up that we had 4 people working in the lab. So lots of wafers run, lots of different types, lots of short loops. I want to give my sort of eternal gratitude to Min Hee. You probably all know her. She still works in the lab. She did a lot. Without Min, we never would have had any product. She was the, you know, she was the anchor. She was the one actually doing the work. I came in for releases because I couldn't force that on her. That was just nothing I would want to do that, force that on anybody. But everything else was done by her. And then I also want to say thanks to Sam in the audience for also fearlessly diving into processing. There he is. Sam joined Iris right at the end, right when we were ramping up, and just dove right in and did a lot of processing in the nano lab. Helped us with, I mean, all sorts of stuff. So that was wonderful. Again, as we saw, it's not just MEMS. You have to package them. You have to do electronics, so forth. So we did all sorts of packaging, these horrendous things in the upper left, big fat boards, off-the-shelf PGAs. Hey, we have to put a cover glass on them because they don't like dust. So hey, let's put this little magnetic cover slip. That's this blue thing here. These are all still horrendous. I always laughed at you guys. Tiny little MEMS mirror with this big, massive package behind it. That's life. We got fancier. We made this nice sealed package. We even did for applications that required high power. We were hitting our mirrors with 10, and in some cases 50 watts of laser power. So we needed some water cooling as well. We had big things. We had to make some custom PGA packages. Again, this stupid magnetic cover slip that worked at the time. We then did a 2nd generation package where it was nice and tight and compact and had flex circuits, and we're able to sort of house things in something that looks a little bit more professional. Pamela Caton was also a BSACer. She was fundamental in a lot of this packaging and just basically covered the gamut and did, you know, helped in countless other areas. Electronics and software, you need, remember back that picture of the whole AO system, you need all that to get it to work. This is my shout out to Carl Kempf. He's a PhD in controls here at Berkeley. And then a close friend of mine, Mark, who did a lot of the software. We did all sorts of electronics in the upper left. These are the tools that although I didn't do them, Carl did them, but I did a lot of initial design. I did a lot of initial software design. These are all tools that you can learn at BSAC and as an undergrad. So this goes back to the tools, the fundamental tools. You all have them. to do this. So don't be shy about running out and trying to create a company around it. And then, of course, we did a lot of optics. That was thanks to Nathan. And I'm just going to cut this short.
Don't have to.
It's a summer. That's a good point. If you really want to hear me talk, I will. Okay, so that's all it took. We did lots of optical systems. We did all sorts of contracts. I think I mentioned that. And that's some of the things at the right. We had to, ultimately we had this little mirror, but it didn't sell itself. We had to show applications. We had to show it working. We had to give people a reason why they would want to buy it. And that meant that even though we were just a adaptive optics company and a MEMS company, we had to build all sorts of optical systems and imaging systems just to show people that, yes, these work. There were a lot of doubts. People were saying, oh, you can't do an imaging system with a segmented mirror. It's just not possible. Fortunately, I'm stubborn. When people say you can't do it, call that a challenge. That's how I took it. And really, we ended up showing a lot of people in the world that really should have known better, that you can do many of these things. They had some fundamental assumptions that were wrong that we looked at the time and thought, okay, we can do this. We weren't sure. Nobody knew. But we could do it. And so that's but we had to prove it to people. And that's why we had to actually build these imaging systems and work with people on campus. This is an imaging system in the upper right, done through the Vision Science program. Austin Rorta is the professor. We teamed up with him. We brought in our mirror and a control system with their optics. And they, of course, have the human resources. They had the ability to shine lasers in people's eyes and take images. We didn't. All right. If you're going to make something and make a company, you're going to have to turn a lot of stones over to figure out where you can sell this stuff to. And we did that. We worked with the retinal imaging in the upper left. That's an image taken with one of our mirrors. We worked with a Bausch and Lomb system. You can see that right up here. We worked with people doing communications with optical vortex beams because I didn't totally understand them, I'll be honest, but hey, we could do it. That's a shape we could do, and found out we had some neat capabilities with the segmented mirror. We even did some work with a student of Professor Laura Waller's here as well. I don't remember now exactly what Jay worked on, but we tried everything. We basically reached out and threw mirrors in people's hands. We worked with NASA on trying to build a mirror for eventually what would be a space-based telescope for exoplanet imaging. We put mirrors onto telescopes. That's the Lick Observatory. We got a mirror on the Subaru 8-meter telescope in Hawaii. We worked with laser guides or uplink correction to try to correct the laser beam before it makes it up into the sky. We tried to correct photons coming down from the sky. We built all sorts of astronomical instruments. This is just a cartoon sketch of one of the first instruments we built that was used at Lick Observatory. And again, we had a lot of help from a lot of people using our mirrors to do retinal imaging, mouse brain imaging, retinal imaging of mice, all different permutations of biological imaging. That image on the lower right is courtesy of Naji, who's here. She was at Howard Hughes Medical Institute at the time, if I remember right. She's now a professor here that worked with our mirrors, and I think still uses it. Remember back to what I said about it can't be done. This was kind of a demonstration. People thought with a segmented mirror, even tip and tilt, you can't make a smooth shape. You just can't do it. You'll always get these artifacts. And this was a demonstration of us showing that no, you'll get these artifacts because you can't position the mirror reliably open loop. You can't measure it reliably with a Schack-Hartmann. And so this was a demonstration of actual physical mirrors done under an interferometer, where essentially the color represents the height. And so what you're seeing here is what we call a Zernike tree. It's different modal shapes, Zernike modes, that you put on a mirror to create these optical phase patterns. And this was our big demonstrator. Like, hey, you could do this. You can make nice, relatively smooth optical shapes. It gets a little wonky, down at these higher orders. That's why you need more segments, as we show over here. But you can do it. So that's that rule number 12. Just again, back to if somebody says it can't be done, take it as a challenge. But the corollary to that is beware of rule 12. If you keep butting your head, be realistic at some point. And this is the case we won. Other cases, not so much. Yeah.
How many years did it take to to get to this point? Like what year were you guys? able
Oh,
to
that's a great question. That one on the left, I mean, that's refined. The first sort of image of, and what this took was just, so you know, it took a fully functional mirror. That took a long time. We actually had that within about 3 years. Once we moved over to Fairchild Semiconductor, that was the magic, one of the magic pieces to getting higher yields. So getting that fully yielding mirror, that was it. Getting electronics, getting calibration and control, doing that, you know, we use the WICO interferometer, white light interferometer, in the nano at the micro lab at the time. That took a lot of software. So I'd say all that and getting it to work well took probably 6 years, 7 years. I'd have to go back and look. We refined it. The first ones weren't nearly as pretty as that. It took us another year or two to refine it. Took us a lot longer to get the 489 actuator mirror to do that, because that was, this yield on that is really a big challenge, especially since we were doing contact litho. Different story. Oh, some more lessons for you. I'm sure you love these. Look, you can survive running a high-tech business in a small market. Iris AO is proof. We did it for 16 years, but look, there's just not a lot of room for failures, letting failures get too big. If something fails, you've got to cut bait soon and move on to the next thing. And corollary to that is it's really better to make a lot of small mistakes and learn from them quickly and move on. You need to embrace the minimum viable product mentality when developing anything, any product. That's something to carry with you, whether it be a product, any program, anything, whatever. And what that means is, what's the minimum thing that somebody would buy? What's that functionality somebody needs? As engineers, we love to refine things. If I had endless time, I would just sit and just polish. I mean, make the perfect whatever. You can't do that in a business. You just can't. You'll get nowhere. Really, what you need to do is get to a high quality minimum feature product out there, interacting with people as soon as you can, because that's when you're going to get the real feedback. And once you have that, you can then refine and do that refining. So as an engineer, if you really want to refine, do it after you get real feedback from people. On the personal side, vacations and breaks are critical. It helps you get out of ruts, gives you space for fresh perspectives, helps you recharge. Take care of your physical and mental health, exercise. This is hard doing this stuff. If you don't take care of that, you will degrade very quickly. Don't forget your family and friends. I'm happy to say I quipped about it, but you know, I still have my wife, I still have my kids around. That's a good thing. I can't say that about a lot of colleagues, a lot of people that have gone through this. It can overwhelm you. Try to have some fun along the way. The last one that I found, and this is something to carry with me from Iris days to wherever, is really treat coworkers, employees, vendors, custodians, delivery people, everybody, treat them with respect and dignity. That's really, I think, in the end, when I look back at the years of Iris, that's what made us so successful, is we had a team of people that really were engaged. And because we all respected each other, everybody worked at a performance level that was amazing. I'm not sure, not many companies can pull off as much technology with 4 people, eventually 10, but if you sort of integrated the total time, on average, you know, maybe it was 6 people. We did a heck of a lot of stuff, and that only happened because we all understood each other, worked well with each other, had mutual respect, and then moved on and did things. So the afterlife, what happened? Is it all over when you decide to close? You know, now what do I do? I took a long time to close Iris. You know, in hindsight, I could have closed it a lot sooner. I don't regret it. I talk about it, I joke about it, but really, you know, the question is that I was pondering, it's like, great, now it's squandered or spent, or whatever you want to call it, 16 years of my life doing this. What have I just committed career suicide? And the answer is no. Honestly, when I've gone out there and tried to look, you know, found jobs, interviewed and so forth, with different companies along the way, is generally saw it as like, oh my God, you've got real life experience, right? These are things that you know that other people will never stumble into. You know, and as I've embraced those mistakes, those turn into lessons learned. So yeah, it's only been positive, you know, reactions from employers I've looked at through the years. The skills you're learning in BSAC, they'll carry you through. No matter where you go, no matter what you do, as long as you just keep moving forward and learn from those mistakes, you know, things will happen, companies will close, you know, you'll quit jobs, you might get fired from jobs because of whatever circumstances, but just keep in mind that you've got the tools that you learned here, they will carry with you through your entire career. So hey, your future's bright. Enjoy the ride. I'll leave it at that. You can read rules 14 and 15. I'm getting a little tired of my rules because I talk too much. So I've got whatever time for questions.
Well, we went over, let's take some questions.
So I want to make sure I understand, everything that you sold was customer driven, customized, right? Or did you have a standard product?
We did have a standard product. We sold that 111 actuator device, this guy here, right in the middle. That you could buy on Edmund Optics. You could go walk down your credit card and buy that one.
What's the, what type of what space is buying this, the academic space?
It was all academic researchers. Yeah,
Okay.
we went out, again, there were sort of companies, industrial folks, so laser we went out to laser companies, literally intercavity lasers, where we were actually tuning designs. We talked to all the major players, Coherent, Spectra Physics, and so forth. We worked with laser machining companies. BSAC, we had a lot of work with, and that's, they were, the idea is that we would stick one of our DMs into one of their laser machining systems, because as you're drilling through vias, all sorts of aberrations come into play. It'd be really nice to dynamically change focus. So we had a lot of those, and they were all using this 111 actuator mirror. The variants that we did were the dielectric coatings for the lasers and things like that. But it did all spawn from our sort of research grade device. That's what we were using as our vehicle into the different industrial applications. And that's what they used. And, knowing full well that it's going to have to be tuned and dialed into what they need. But, the point is we had something working well enough for them to prove their concepts.
So you had a standard product.
Mhm.
You also had built custom systems.
We built a lot of custom stuff. Yeah. So we had the MEMS we tried to standardize, because MEMS development is super expensive, takes a long time, and just fraught with all sorts of pitfalls. And so that's what we came up with. That we had our 37 segment mirror, 111 actuators. 111 is a bigger number, so that's better for marketing. Another lesson learned. 489 actuator mirror. We also sold that with sub rings. So if you didn't want to spend the full money, you got to buy the central, 85 actuators working, or the central 121 actuators working. Sort of like the mantra of the old Intel 486. If you wanted the math coprocessor, you paid for it. If you didn't, you got the one that they got to make money on, because it wouldn't have worked otherwise. So, it let us sell mirrors that weren't quite fully functional. And then, yeah, and so that's where a lot of the customization came into the, things around it, the packaging, the electronics, or the software to run it.
And do one more.
All right, first of all, that was an amazing talk, and I appreciate the honesty. Okay, what in all of this was your favorite part?
Oh, that's a good question. I like most of it, actually. I think maybe the favorite part was to be able to create be able to go from end to end, have that idea, implement it, get it to work, and then actually go out and see it in use by customers and talk to customers and have other people sort of look at your baby and say, yeah, I like this. And so it was that big. I tend to like sort of big, long, drawn out projects, I guess. And it was that big, being able to take something from start to finish. That was really inspiring. And I love that.
All right, thanks.
That's like Michael again. Thank you very much. And there's pizza out